Okay, whenever you're factoring and there is a number in front of your squared term, I'm going to take the first and the last number and multiply them. So 3 times 30 equals 90. And I'm going to write down the factors of 90. So 90 divided by 1 is 90. 90 divided by 2 is 45. 90 divided by 3 is 30. 4 doesn't work. 4 doesn't work. 5. 90 divided by 5 is 18. 90 divided by 6 is 15. 90 divided by 7 doesn't work. 8 doesn't work. 90 divided by 9 is 10. And then you're repeating because you've already got a 10. So when you start repeating yourself in this T table, you're finished. So I'm going to bring down the first term and the sign after it. And then I'm going to work backwards. And you always want the biggest first. And I'll explain that in a moment. Okay, I want to work backwards. I want the factors of 90 that when I add them equal 19. So I want to add up to 19. 9 and 10. So I'm going to put the biggest one first, 10, and you put your letter with that. Okay, so I have a negative 10, but I want a negative 19, so that 9 also has to be negative. Because those two in the middle have to add up to the one above it, and negative 10 and another negative 9 is a total of 19 negatives. Bring down the next term. Okay, so the first and the last term, you're always bringing those down. You're splitting up the middle term. So make parentheses around the first two. I have an x in common, so take the x out. So I have a 3 and 2 x's. I took an x out, so that's a 3 and 1 x left. Bring down the minus. I have a 10 and an x. I took the x out, so that's a 10 left. You bring down the sign after the parentheses, so that was a minus sign. And then you just look at these numbers. Don't put parentheses around them, just look at them. So 9 and 30, the biggest number I can divide those by is 3. You want the biggest thing that you can divide them by. So that would be 3. So I have what's in the parentheses, 3x minus 10. And then these two things that are not in the parentheses, you put those together. X minus 3, and you are finished. So again, multiply the first and last number. 6 times 5 equals 30. I'm going to make a T table with factors of 30 that I'm going to use in a moment. So 30 divided by 1 is 30. 30 divided by 2 is 15. 30 divided by 3 is 10. 4 doesn't work. 30 divided by 5 is 6. And you're repeating, so you're finished. Now over here, you bring down your first term and the sign after it. Bring that down. Now, I want to work backwards. I want to add to get 11. So 5 and 6 add up to 11. You want to put the biggest one first and the letter with that. So I have a negative 6. I want a negative 11. So that 5 also has to be negative because those two have to add up to the one above it. And then you bring down your final term plus 5. Put parentheses around the first two. Okay, the numbers themselves, they have a 6 in common, obviously. And each term has an x. So I have a 6 and 2 x's. I took a 6 and 1 x out, so that's an x left over. Bring down the minus. Now remember, this is division, so 6 divided by 6 is 1. And then you have an x, but you took it out. So if you just said, I took x out, so there's nothing there, you can't do that because you have to have something after the minus sign. So you have to put the 1. Now you bring down the sign after that, which is a minus, and you look at these two numbers, and the biggest number I can divide 5 and 5 with is 5. So I have what's in the parentheses, and I have what's outside of the parentheses. They have to go together, and I'm finished. Okay, multiply the first and the last numbers. 2 times 30 equals 60. 60 divided by 1 is 60. 60 divided by 2 is 30. 60 divided by 3 is 20. 60 divided by 4 is 15. 60 divided by 5 is 12. 60 divided by 6 is 10. 7 doesn't work. 8 doesn't work. 9 doesn't work. And we have 10. Okay, so bring down the first term, 2z squared, and the sign after it minus. We want to work backwards. Add to get 17. Well, that's 5 and 12. So the biggest one first. So 12z, negative 12, we want a negative 17, so that 5 also has to be negative, because those two have to add up to the z term over here, and then bring down your positive 30. Parentheses around the first two, 2 and 12, I can divide those by 2. They each have a z in common. So I have a 2 and 2 z's. I took a 2 and 1 z out, so that's a z left over, minus sign. 12 divided by 2 is 6. I have a z, but I took it out. Bring down the sign after the parentheses. Look at the numbers. Between 5 and 30, I can divide those both by 5. So I have z minus 6. I have what's in the parentheses, and then what's outside of the parentheses goes together. 2z minus 5, and that's the answer.